The old-timers in Watauga County will tell you that some mountains don't want to be climbed. They'll tell you about trails that loop back on themselves, about compasses that spin like ceiling fans, and about the people who walked into the fog and never walked out again. But what they won't tell you, at least not until you've earned their trust, is about the voices that call your name from the ridges when no one else is around. My name is Sarah, and I grew up in a small town at the base of Roan Mountain, right on the Tennessee-North Carolina border. If you've never been, Roan is beautiful in a way that makes your chest ache. The balds, those open, grassy meadows at the summit, stretch out like something from a dream. In June, the rhododendrons bloom so thick and pink that it looks like the mountain is blushing. But beauty doesn't mean safety. My family has lived in these hills for 5 generations, and we know the rules. You don't go into the woods after dark, you don't whistle at night, and you never ever answer when someone calls your name on the trail, unless you can see their face. I learned that last rule the hard way. It was late September, just before my senior year of high school. The summer tourists had cleared out, and the mountains were ours again. I'd been hiking Roan since I was old enough to walk, so when my friend Emma suggested we hike up to the grassy ridge bald to catch the sunset, I didn't think twice. We parked at Carver's Gap around 4 in the afternoon. The air was crisp, cool in that way that fall air is in the mountains, sharp and clean, like it's been filtered through stone and sky. The trail was easy, wide and well-worn, winding through clusters of mountain ash and patches of wild blueberries. Emma and I talked the whole way up, laughing about nothing, the way you do when you're 17, and the world still feels small and safe. We reached the bald just as the sun started to dip. The view was unreal, rolling peaks in every direction, painted in shades of gold and rust. The sky was streaked with orange and purple, and the wind moved through the grass in soft waves. For a while, we just sat there, quiet, watching. The sun dropped fast. 1 minute the sky was glowing. The next, it was dusk. That in-between time when the light turns gray and shadows stretch long. Emma checked her phone. "We should head back," she said. "I don't want to hike in the dark." I nodded. Neither did I. We started down the trail, moving quickly. The wind had picked up, and the temperature was dropping. I pulled my jacket tighter and kept my eyes on the path. That's when I heard it. Sarah. My name. Clear as day. A man's voice, low and calm, coming from somewhere off the trail to my left. I stopped. Emma kept walking for a few steps, then turned back. "You okay?" she asked. I hesitated. "Did you hear that?" "Hear what?" "Someone called my name." Emma frowned. She glanced around. The trail was empty. There was no one ahead of us, no one behind us. "Probably just the wind," she said. I wanted to believe her, but the voice hadn't sounded like wind. It had sounded like a person. We kept walking. A few minutes later, I heard it again. "Sarah." This time it was closer, right behind me. I spun around. Nothing. Just the empty trail, the grass swaying in the wind. Emma was watching me now, her face tight with worry. "Sarah, you're freaking me out," she said. "I'm not making it up," I whispered. "Someone keeps saying my name." Emma looked around again, slower this time. Her hands were shaking. "Let's just go," she said, fast. We started jogging. The voice followed us. Every few minutes I'd hear it, sometimes from the left, sometimes from the right. Once I swear it came from directly in front of me, even though the trail was empty. "Sarah, Sarah, wait. Sarah, come here." Each time, the voice sounded different. Sometimes it was deep. Sometimes it was soft. Once, it sounded like my dad. But I never saw anyone. Emma heard it too, eventually. I could tell by the way she kept glancing over her shoulder, by the way her breathing got faster. "Don't answer it," she said. "My grandma told me, don't ever answer." I didn't. We were almost back to the parking lot when the voice changed. This time it didn't call my name. It laughed, low and rasping, like old leather creaking. It came from the trees just off the trail, maybe 10 feet away. I didn't look. I didn't slow down. Emma grabbed my arm and we ran. We reached the car and jumped inside. Emma locked the doors and started the engine, her hands shaking so hard she could barely turn the key. As we pulled out of the parking lot, I looked back at the trailhead. There was someone standing there. A man, tall and thin, wearing a dark coat. He was facing the trail, his back to us, perfectly still. I blinked, and he was gone. We didn't talk about it that night, not in the car, not when Emma dropped me off at home. But the next day I did some asking around. My neighbor, Mr. Dockery, has lived in these mountains his whole life. When I told him what happened, he didn't seem surprised. "Roan's got a collar," he said. "Always has. Folks say it's been there since before the Cherokee left. Some think it's a spirit. Some think it's something older." "What does it want?" I asked. Mr. Dockery looked at me for a long moment. "It wants you to follow it," he said. "Into the woods, off the trail, and if you do, you don't come back." I haven't hiked Roan Mountain since that day. Emma moved away for college, and we don't talk much anymore. But sometimes late at night, when the wind picks up and the trees start to creak, I think about that voice, about how calm it sounded, how familiar, and I wonder if I'd answered, if I'd stepped off the trail and followed it into the trees, would I have found something waiting for me? Or would I have just kept walking deeper and deeper into the mountain until I forgot my own name entirely? In the deepest hollers of West Virginia, there are places where the old ways still hold strong, places where people remember recipes passed down through centuries, where they still mark their doorways with salt, and where they know better than to mock what they don't understand. My grandmother was one of those people, and the night she made me sleep with an iron horseshoe under my pillow, I learned why. If you've got family roots in the mountains, or if you've heard stories from folks who do, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. The old ways have a way of sticking around, don't they?
My name is David, and every summer when I was a kid, my parents would send me to stay with my grandmother in Webster County, West Virginia.
Mama lived alone in a small house at the end of a gravel road that wound so deep into the holler you couldn't see the main highway anymore. Just trees, thick old-growth forest that seemed to swallow sound. The house itself was simple. 2 bedrooms, a kitchen with a wood-burning stove, and a porch that wrapped around the front. No internet, no cable TV, just Mamaw, her garden, and the woods pressing in from every side. I loved it there. Mamaw taught me how to catch crawdads in the creek, how to tell when a storm was coming by the way the leaves turned silver, and how to make biscuits so light they practically floated off the plate. But she also taught me the rules. Don't leave your shoes pointing toward the door at night. Don't open the door after dark unless you know who's knocking. And if you hear someone calling your name from the woods, don't answer, and don't go looking. I was 10 years old the summer I learned why. It started on a Tuesday night in late July. The air was thick and heavy, the kind of heat that sits on your chest and makes it hard to breathe. Even with the windows open, the house felt stifling. Mama and I had spent the day picking blackberries along the old logging road. My fingers were stained purple, and my arms were covered in scratches from the thorns, but I didn't mind. We'd made 2 pies and a jar of jam, and the house smelled like sugar in summer. After supper, we sat on the porch and watched the fireflies come out. Mama rocked slowly in her chair, humming an old hymn I didn't know the words to. I sat on the steps, my bare feet dangling over the edge, listening to the cicadas drone in the trees. It was peaceful, until the knocking started. 3 sharp raps on the front door. I turned around, startled. Mama stopped rocking. "Who'd be coming by this late?" I asked. Mama didn't answer. She just stared at the door, her face very still. The knock came again. 3 raps, steady and deliberate. "Mamaw?" I said. She held up one hand, silencing me. Then she stood up slowly, walked to the edge of the porch, and looked out into the yard. There was no car in the driveway, no flashlight beams, no voices, just the dark woods and the sound of crickets. Mama turned back to me. "Go inside," she said quietly. "Don't open that door. Don't look through the window. Just go to your room and stay there till I come get you." "But—" "Now, David." I'd never heard her use that tone before. It wasn't angry. It was something else, something cold and careful. I went inside. I stood in the hallway, my heart pounding, and listened. The knocking came again, 3 times. Then a pause, then 3 more. I heard Mama's footsteps on the porch, slow and deliberate. Then I heard her voice, firm and clear. "You're not welcome here. Go on back where you came from." Silence. Then the knocking started again, louder this time, faster. Rap, 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 rap. It didn't stop. I heard Mama mutter something under her breath, a prayer maybe, or something older. And then the knocking just stopped. The silence that followed was so complete, it felt like the whole world had been muted. A few minutes later, Mama came inside. Her face was pale and her hands were shaking, but she smiled when she saw me standing in the hallway. "It's all right now," she said. "Just something passing through." "What was it?" I asked. "Nothing you need to worry about." She walked into the kitchen and came back with a small iron horseshoe. She pressed it into my hand. "Put this under your pillow tonight," she said, "and don't open your window no matter what you hear." I didn't sleep much that night. I lay in bed with the horseshoe tucked under my pillow, staring at the ceiling and listening. At first there was nothing, just the usual sounds of the house settling, the creak of old wood, the hum of crickets outside. But then, around midnight, I heard it. Footsteps, slow and deliberate, circling the house. They moved across the gravel driveway, crunching softly, then onto the grass, then onto the porch. I held my breath. The footsteps stopped right outside my window. I could hear breathing, low and raspy, like someone who'd been running. Then a voice. "David." My name, soft and sweet, like a lullaby. "David, let me in." It sounded like my mother. I wanted to look. I wanted to pull back the curtain and see who was out there. But I remembered what Mama said. "Don't open your window, no matter what you hear." So I didn't move. The voice came again, softer this time. "David, please, I'm scared. Let me in." My chest tightened. It sounded so real, so much like her. But my mother was 3 hours away in Charleston. She wasn't here. I squeezed my eyes shut and pulled the blanket over my head. The voice kept calling for a long time, pleading, crying. And then, finally, it stopped. The next morning, Mama made me breakfast like nothing had happened. Eggs, bacon, biscuits with butter and honey. I ate in silence, too tired and too scared to ask questions. But when I was done, Mama sat down across from me and folded her hands on the table. "You did good last night," she said, "not opening that window." "What was it?" I asked. Mama was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Something old. Older than this house. Older than these hills, maybe." "What does it want?" "To get inside," she said simply. "It knocks, it calls, it sounds like someone you love. And if you let it in—" She trailed off, shaking her head. "Well, you don't let it in." "Has it come before?" "Once or twice," Mama said. "My mama taught me how to keep it out. Salt on the windowsills, iron by the doors, and you never ever invite it in." I looked down at my hands. "Why does it sound like Mom?" Mama reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Because it knows what'll make you open the door. I'm 34 now, and Mama passed away 5 years ago. I inherited the house. though I don't visit as often as I should. It's hard to be there without her. But last summer, I brought my daughter up for the weekend. She's 8, curious and fearless, and she loved the woods just like I did. On our last night, we sat on the porch and watched the fireflies, and just before bed, I gave her a small iron horseshoe. "Keep this under your pillow," I said. "Why?" she asked. I thought about lying, about telling her it was just an old tradition, but instead I said, "Because some things still knock, and it's better to be safe." She looked at me, her eyes wide and serious. Then she nodded, and I knew, just like I did, she'd remember. There's a reason the old coal towns in eastern Kentucky feel abandoned, even when people still live there. The mines closed decades ago, but something stayed behind in those tunnels, something that doesn't like being disturbed. My uncle found that out the hard way when he took a job as a night watchman at the old Blackwater mine. He lasted 3 nights, and he's never spoken about the third one. Not to anyone, except me. Have you ever been to an old mining town, or do you know someone who worked underground? Drop a comment. I'd love to hear if you've felt that heaviness those places carry. My name is Michael, and I grew up in Harlan County, Kentucky, right in the heart of coal country. If you've never been, it's beautiful in a hard kind of way. Narrow valleys hemmed in by steep forested ridges, towns that cling to the hillsides like they're holding on for dear life. And everywhere you look, reminders of the mines, rusted equipment, boarded up entrances, and rows of identical company houses that nobody lives in anymore. My Uncle Ray spent 20 years working underground before the Blackwater mine shut down in 1987. He was a good miner, careful, respectful of the mountain. But when the mine closed, jobs dried up. Ray tried construction for a while, then drove a truck. But nothing stuck, and by the time 1995 rolled around, he was running out of options. That's when the county hired him as a night watchman at Blackwater. The mine had been sealed for years, but there'd been break-ins, teenagers looking for a thrill, scrappers looking for copper. The county wanted someone to keep an eye on the place until they could figure out what to do with it. Ray needed the money, so he took the job. He lasted 3 nights. The first night was quiet. Ray told me he parked his truck near the old office building, a squat concrete structure at the mouth of the mine. The entrance itself had been sealed with a steel gate and a heavy chain, but you could still see into the tunnel, just a few feet before the darkness swallowed everything. Ray brought a thermos of coffee, a flashlight, and a little portable radio. He figured he'd sit in the truck, listen to the game, and collect his paycheck. The first few hours were fine. He listened to the Wildcats play Louisville, drank his coffee, and watched the trees sway in the wind. The mine was dead quiet. No cars on the road, no animals moving in the brush, just silence. Around midnight, the radio started cutting out. At first, Ray thought it was the signal. The mountains play hell with reception. But the static wasn't random. It came in pulses, long, rhythmic bursts that almost sounded like breathing. Ray turned the radio off, and that's when he heard it, a sound from inside the mine, a low metallic groan, like old steel bending under weight. Ray got out of the truck and walked over to the gate. He shone his flashlight into the tunnel, but the beam didn't reach far, just a few yards of cracked concrete and rusted rails before the dark took over. He stood there for a long time, listening. The sound didn't come again. Ray told himself it was just the mountain settling. Old mines do that. The timbers rot, the tunnels shift. It's normal. But when he got back in the truck, he locked the doors. The second night was worse. Ray showed up at dusk, same as before, parked near the office, poured his coffee, turned on the radio. But this time, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. It started as soon as the sun went down, a prickling on the back of his neck, a tightness in his chest. Ray kept glancing at the mine entrance, expecting to see someone standing there. But the gate was empty. The tunnel was dark. Still, the feeling didn't go away. Around 10 o'clock, Ray heard footsteps. Not outside the truck, inside the mine. Slow, deliberate footsteps echoing off the stone walls. Ray grabbed his flashlight and got out of the truck. He walked up to the gate and aimed the beam into the tunnel. "Anybody in there?" he called. His voice bounced back at him, hollow and strange. No answer. But the footsteps didn't stop. They kept coming, closer and closer, until it sounded like someone was standing just on the other side of the gate. Ray stepped back. He could feel his heart hammering in his chest. And then, just as suddenly as they started, the footsteps stopped. Ray waited. 1 minute, 2, nothing. He went back to the truck, but he didn't sleep. He sat there with the doors locked and the engine running until the sun came up. On the third night, Ray almost didn't go. He told me he sat in his driveway for 20 minutes, staring at the steering wheel, trying to talk himself into it. It was just a mine, just an empty tunnel. There was nothing down there. But deep down, Ray knew that wasn't true. Still, he needed the money, so he went. The third night was different from the start. When Ray pulled up to the mine, the air felt wrong, thick and cold, even though it was late August. And the smell. Ray said he'll never forget the smell. Like wet stone and rust and something else, something rotten. He got out of the truck and walked toward the gate. That's when he saw the light. Deep in the tunnel, maybe 50 yards back, there was a faint glow, flickering and yellow like a lantern. Ray stopped. Miners used to carry carbide lamps underground, little brass lanterns that burned acetylene gas. But the mine had been closed for 8 years. There was no reason for anyone to have a light down there. Ray called out, "This is private property, come on out." The light didn't move. Ray pulled out his flashlight and shone it into the tunnel. The beam cut through the dark, but it didn't reach the lantern. It was too far back. "I'm calling the sheriff," Ray shouted. Still nothing. And then the light started moving, toward him. Slow at first, then faster. Ray backed up. The light kept coming, bobbing and swaying like someone was carrying it. But Ray couldn't see anyone, just the glow, growing brighter and brighter. He turned and ran. Ray made it to his truck and fumbled with the keys, his hands shaking so bad he dropped them twice. He finally got the door open, climbed inside, and locked it behind him. And then he looked back at the mine. The light was at the gate. It hovered there, just on the other side of the steel bars, flickering softly. And behind the light, Ray saw a face, pale and gaunt, with hollow eyes and a slack mouth. It stared at him through the gate, unblinking. Ray didn't move, he didn't breathe. And then the face smiled. Ray started the truck and floored it. He called the county the next morning and quit. Didn't ask for his last paycheck. Didn't give an explanation. Just said he wasn't going back. The county hired someone else a few weeks later, a younger guy, early 20s. He lasted 1 night and quit 2. After that, they stopped trying. The mine's still there. The gate's still locked, but nobody watches it anymore. Ray didn't talk about what happened for a long time. Not to his wife, not to his friends, not even to me. But one night, a few years ago, we were sitting on his back porch, drinking beer and watching the sun go down, and I asked him about it. "Uncle Ray," I said, "what did you really see at Blackwater?" He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "You know how they say the mountain takes care of its own?" I nodded. "Well," Ray said, "that mine took a lot of men. Cave-ins, black lung, explosions, hundreds of them over the years." He took a sip of his beer. "I think some of them never left." I asked him what he thought the light was. Ray looked at me, his face serious. "I think it was a miner," he said, "still carrying his lamp, still walking his shift." "But why would he come to the gate?" I asked. Ray set down his beer and folded his hands. Because he wanted out. I haven't been back to Blackwater since I was a kid, but sometimes, late at night, I think about that miner, still walking through the dark, still carrying his light, still waiting for someone to open the gate. And I wonder if Ray had stayed just a little longer, if he'd unlocked that chain and pulled the gate open, would the miner have walked out into the world, or would something else have come with him? In the mountains of Southwest Virginia, there are bridges that folks won't cross after sunset, not because they're unsafe. Most of them are newer than the roads they're built on, but because of what people see standing in the middle of them. A woman in a white dress, always alone, always facing away. And if you stop to help her, you'll wish you hadn't. If you've ever driven through the mountains at night and seen something that made you second-guess stopping, I want to hear about it. Share your story in the comments below. My name is Lauren, and I'm a hospice nurse in Wise County, Virginia. It's not an easy job, but it's a good one. I visit patients in their homes, help manage their pain, and make sure they're comfortable in their final days. Most of my patients live way out in the hollers, miles from the nearest hospital, so I spend a lot of time on back roads. I've learned to navigate by landmarks instead of GPS, the old white church with the crooked steeple, the rusted silo near Booker Branch, the one-lane bridge over Cutter's Creek. That bridge is the reason I'm telling this story. It was early October, just after dark. I'd spent the evening with a patient named Mrs. Lawson, a sweet woman in her 80s who was losing her fight with cancer. Her daughter had been with us, and we talked for hours about recipes, about the garden, about anything except what was coming. By the time I left, it was past 9. The road back to town was empty. No streetlights, no other cars, just my headlights cutting through the dark and the trees pressing in on both sides. I was tired. The kind of tired that settles into your bones after a long shift. But I knew the roads, and I knew the drive. 40 minutes, maybe less if I didn't hit any deer. I was halfway home when I reached Cutter's Bridge. Cutter's Bridge is narrow, just wide enough for one car at a time. It's made of old steel and concrete, and it sits low over the creek, so low you can hear the water rushing underneath when you roll your windows down. I'd crossed it 100 times before, maybe more. But that night, something was different. As I came around the bend, my headlights caught something in the middle of the bridge. A woman. She was standing in the center of the road, facing away from me. She wore a long white dress that hung loose around her shoulders, and her hair was dark and tangled, falling halfway down her back. She wasn't moving. I slowed down. My first thought was that she'd been in an accident. Maybe her car had broken down. Maybe she was hurt. I stopped about 10 feet away and rolled down my window. "Are you okay?" I called. She didn't answer, didn't turn around, just stood there, perfectly still, her arms hanging limp at her sides. I put the car in park and opened my door. The air was cold, colder than it should have been for early October. I could see my breath. I stepped out of the car, my keys still in my hand, and walked toward her. "Miss?" I said. "Do you need help?" "Nothing." I stopped a few feet behind her. Up close, I could see that her dress was old, not vintage, old, like something from another century. The fabric was stained and torn at the hem, and it looked damp, like she'd been walking through the creek. Her feet were bare. "Miss, are you hurt?" I asked again, my voice softer this time. And then she spoke. "Do you see him?" Her voice was quiet, flat, like she was asking about the weather. I frowned. "See who?" "In the water," she said. "Do you see him?" I looked over the side of the bridge. The creek was running fast, swollen from recent rain. The water was dark and churning, and I couldn't see much beyond the surface. "I don't see anyone," I said. The woman didn't move. "He's there," she said. "He's always there." A chill ran down my spine. Something about her voice, the way she stood so still. I took a step back. "Are you lost?" I asked. "Can I call someone for you?" She didn't answer, and then, slowly, she started to turn around. I don't know why, but every instinct I had screamed at me to run. I backed toward my car. The woman kept turning, her movements slow and deliberate, like she was winding up a music box. And then I saw her face. It wasn't a face, not really. Her features were blurred, smudged, like a photograph left out in the rain. Her eyes were dark hollows, and her mouth was just a thin black line. But she was smiling. I ran. I got back to the car, slammed the door, and locked it. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely grip the wheel. The woman didn't follow me. She just stood there facing my car now, her head tilted slightly to one side. I threw the car into reverse and hit the gas. I didn't stop until I reached the main highway. My heart was pounding, and my hands wouldn't stop shaking. I pulled into a gas station and sat there for a long time, trying to calm down. When I finally felt steady enough to drive, I took the long way home, the route that didn't cross Cutter's Bridge. The next morning, I told my coworker about what I'd seen. She listened without interrupting, her face serious. When I finished, she said, "You saw her." "Saw who?" I asked. "The woman on the bridge," she said. "She's been there for years, decades maybe." I stared at her. "What are you talking about?" My coworker leaned back in her chair. "There's a story," she said, "about a woman who drowned herself in Cutter's Creek back in the 1950s. Her husband died in a logging accident, and she couldn't live without him. So one night she walked out to the bridge, climbed over the railing, and jumped. I felt my stomach twist. They found her body downstream a few days later." My coworker continued, "But people say she never left. They see her on the bridge, always in the same white dress, always asking the same question." "Do you see him?" I whispered. My coworker nodded. "She's looking for her husband," she said, "waiting for him to come back." I didn't drive over Cutter's Bridge again for months. I took the long way to Mrs. Lawson's house, even though it added 20 minutes to the trip. But eventually, Mrs. Lawson's condition worsened, and I started visiting her every night. The long route ate up too much time, so one evening, I decided to take the bridge again. It was just past sunset. The sky was a deep purple, and the first stars were starting to come out. As I approached the bridge, my chest tightened. I slowed down, and there she was, standing in the middle of the road, facing away, wearing the same white dress. This time I didn't stop. I kept driving, my hands gripping the wheel, my eyes locked straight ahead. As I passed her, I felt the temperature drop. The air inside the car turned icy, and my breath fogged on the windshield. And then I heard it, a voice, soft and pleading. "Do you see him?" I didn't answer. I kept driving. I still cross Cutter's Bridge sometimes, not often, only when I have to. And every time I do, I see her, always in the same spot, always facing away. I don't stop anymore. I don't look at the water, and I never ever answer when she asks her question, because I'm afraid of what I might see if I do. Every small town in Appalachia has at least one house that nobody will go near. Boarded windows, overgrown yard, a for sale sign that's been there so long the wood has rotted through. In my hometown in eastern Tennessee, that house sat at the end of Owl Hollow Road, and the reason nobody would go near it wasn't because of what happened there 50 years ago. It's because of what still happens there, every single night at 3:13 a.m. Before we dive in, I want to ask, have you ever lived near a house everyone avoided? A place with a reputation? Let me know in the comments. Those stories have a way of sticking with us, don't they? My name is Ben, and I grew up in a little town called Cosby, Tennessee, right at the edge of the Great Smoky Mountains. It's a quiet place, the kind of town where everybody knows everybody, where you can leave your doors unlocked, and where the biggest excitement is Friday night football. But there's one place in Cosby that nobody talks about. Not unless they have to. The house on Owl Hollow Road. The house has been empty for as long as I can remember. 2 stories. White paint peeling off the siding. Windows boarded up with plywood that's gone gray with age. The porch sags in the middle, and the yard is so overgrown with kudzu and honeysuckle that you can barely see the front steps anymore. It sits about a quarter mile off the main road, tucked into a bend in the holler, where the trees grow thick and the sunlight doesn't quite reach. Nobody goes there. Not kids looking for a place to party, not teenagers on dares, not even the county assessor, because everyone in town knows the rule. Stay away from the house on Owl Hollow Road, especially after dark. When I was 13, my best friend Tyler told me the story. We were sitting on his front porch, drinking sweet tea and watching the cicadas hatch, when I asked him why nobody ever went near the place. Tyler got quiet. Then he said, "You really don't know?" I shook my head. Tyler glanced toward the woods, like he was checking to make sure no one was listening. Then he told me. Back in 1974, a family named the Carters lived in that house. Husband, wife, and 2 little girls. The husband worked at the lumber mill. The wife kept house. The girls went to school in town. By all accounts, they were a normal family. Until one night in late September. Nobody knows exactly what happened, but around 3 in the morning, neighbors half a mile away heard screaming, high-pitched and desperate, echoing through the holler. By the time the sheriff got there, it was over. The husband was dead. Shotgun wound to the chest. The wife was sitting on the kitchen floor, covered in blood, rocking back and forth and humming a lullaby. The 2 little girls were gone. The sheriff searched the house top to bottom. He found blood in the upstairs hallway, handprints on the walls, a broken window in one of the bedrooms, but no sign of the girls. They searched the woods for weeks, brought in dogs, dragged the creek, knocked on every door in the county. Nothing. The girls had vanished. The wife never spoke another word. She was committed to a state hospital, and she died there 6 months later. The house was boarded up, and it's been empty ever since. Tyler said that's not the end of the story, though. He said that every night, at exactly 3:13 a.m., people hear something coming from the house. Singing. A woman's voice, soft and sweet, singing a lullaby. The same lullaby the wife was humming when the sheriff found her. And if you get close enough to the house, you can hear something else. Footsteps. Small footsteps, running through the upstairs hallway. Tyler said his older brother went out there once on a dare, stood in the yard at 3:13 and listened. He heard the singing, and he heard the footsteps. But then he heard something else, a voice, a little girl's voice, calling for help. Tyler's brother ran, didn't stop until he got home, and he's never gone back. I didn't believe him. Not really. I figured it was just a story, something to scare kids with. But the more I asked around, the more I realized everyone in town had heard it. The singing, the footsteps, the voice. And nobody went near that house after dark. When I turned 16, I got my driver's license. And like every other teenager in Cosby, the first thing I wanted to do was test my courage. So one night in late October, I drove out to Owl Hollow Road. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. Not my parents, not Tyler. I just wanted to see for myself. I parked at the end of the driveway and turned off the engine. The house loomed in front of me, dark and silent. The kudzu had climbed halfway up the walls, and the porch sagged so low it looked like it might collapse at any moment. I checked my watch. 2:58 pagi. 15 minutes. I sat in the car, windows down, listening. The night was quiet. No crickets, no owls, just the faint rustle of leaves in the wind. At 3:10, I got out of the car. I walked up the driveway, my flashlight beam sweeping across the overgrown yard. The closer I got, the colder the air became. By the time I reached the porch steps, I could see my breath. I stopped, and I waited. At exactly 3:13, I heard it, singing, soft and distant, coming from somewhere inside the house. A woman's voice, gentle and lilting. "Hush, little baby, don't say a word." My blood turned to ice. I stood frozen, my flashlight shaking in my hand. And then I heard the footsteps, running, light and fast, moving across the upstairs floor, back and forth, like someone was being chased. I should have run. Every part of me was screaming to get back in the car and leave. But I didn't, because then I heard the voice. "Help me." A little girl, quiet and scared. "Please, help me." It was coming from the second floor. I took a step toward the porch, and that's when the singing stopped. The silence that followed was worse than the sounds. Heavy and thick, like the air had turned to syrup. I aimed my flashlight at the upstairs windows, and I saw something. A face. Pale and small, pressed against the glass of the boarded window. A little girl. She was staring down at me, and then she smiled. I ran. I didn't look back, didn't stop, just ran to my car, threw myself inside, and drove. I didn't slow down until I hit the main road. I never went back, and I never told anyone what I saw. Not Tyler, not my parents, not anyone, because part of me knows if I talk about it, if I give it a name, it'll follow me home. I'm 32 now, and I don't live in Cosby anymore, but I still think about that house sometimes, about the singing, the footsteps, the voice, and I wonder, were those little girls ever really lost? Or are they still there, waiting in that house, calling for someone to help them? And if someone did go inside, if someone climbed those stairs and opened that door, would they find those girls? Or would they just become another voice calling out in the dark?